Charles Shapiro. I'm the president of World Affairs Council, and it is such a great pleasure to be here with you today. For those of you who work at the Carter Center, this is fabulous. I'm sure you hang out and the weather's nice and the pond with the koi out back. This is tremendous. I want to give a couple of special welcomes. One is to Nico Weinberg, who is the Chief of Protocol of the state of Georgia. Nico, thank you for being here. Vanessa Ibarra, who is the Director of the Mayor of Atlanta's Office of International Affairs. We've got a good part of the Consular Corps here, so I'm delighted you are here. The Consuls-General of Germany, Melanie Moltmann. I don't see Juan Navarro. Theodoros Dimopoulos from Greece. Oh, there's one in the back. And of course, Andrew Staunton, who's here, who is the Consul General of the United Kingdom in the southeastern United States. Paige, I'm going to invite you to come up here and talk for a minute. Tell us about the Carter Center.
So I didn't get mic'd so I could have separate conversations and not worry about being heard, but thank you for being here. This is our first official external event at the Carter Center since I started 17 months ago. We've been closed since November 1st, and I cannot imagine a better partner to start this with than the World Affairs Council and the UK Consulate. This has been a really important relationship that we've had. When President Carter started the Carter Center, the intention was to have a place where world leaders could gather together and talk about the timely events of the day. And I will say that's exactly where we are 40 years later, the fact that we are gathered here today to hear a little bit more about everything from diplomacy and trade to national security, which actually is interwoven with exactly what the Carter Center does, our peace, justice, and equality work. This is what we have been doing for the last 40 years, and I'm looking forward to hearing the comments that are being made because I think all of these issues come together. I'll tell you, President Carter's one of his last formal public appearances overseas was actually in the House of Lords in the robing room where he was part of the Lord Speaker series, and he said, people in resource-poor countries have the same hope, work ethic, and dreams for their children as you and I do. They're just decent and intelligent. When they receive the right tools and trainings, they will implement the solutions themselves. They will become empowered and be ready to address other challenges. The reality is that these people want to improve their own lives. They just need some hope. And so time and again, the United Kingdom, the United States, and other economies that are more prosperous have leaned in to provide that hope and use those resources. And that is why our partnership with the UK is so important. We've had, for the last 40 years, we have had a very close relationship on neglected tropical diseases, on peace and security, and all of the work that we do together. So this work is never done. I know you're not here to hear me, and so let me, with that, turn this over so you can hear Minister Penny Mordaunt speak and with Charles. And so thank you for being here, and we invite you back now that we are reopened to both the library and the museum, but also to follow us and look at the work that the Carter Center does. So thank you.
Thank you, Paige. I didn't mention that Paige is on the board of directors of the World Affairs Council as well, as is Joe Bankoff, who's here in the audience. You have Minister Mordaunt's bio in the program, and I'm sure you've all read it and committed it to memory. So I'm not going to read it to you. She's a member of Parliament representing Portsmouth North, which is your hometown. That's where you are from. She has a long string of firsts, including the first woman defense secretary in the United Kingdom. But there's a first that's not in her bio that I hope Wikipedia is correct, which is important to me. I teach at Georgia State University, a university that really focuses on first-generation university students. And Minister Mordaunt's a first-generation university student, the first in your family to graduate university. And I just think that is so tremendous and inspiring for all of us. And I'm also guessing that you're the only member of Parliament named after a warship, HMS Penelope, And keeping with her namesake, you're a reserve officer in the Royal Navy. So let me invite you up here. The Right Honorable Penny Mordaunt, MP, Minister of State for Trade. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. And it's wonderful to be back at a physical event, but hello to those that are also joining online. President Carter created this center to promote democratic ideals across the world. Its work is practical, it brings people together, and its mission explicitly states that it will value courage to break new ground. I like that. The most productive moments of my career, and I'm sure yours too, are when we've been a catalyst to those things. The greatest moments in our national history too are also when we've had a relentless focus on making something happen, when we've spanned a divide, built an alliance, and defended what we thought was right. I'm here in the US, touring state by state, because I want to get some practical things to happen, because I want to bring people together, and because I want to awaken you to an opportunity to do something really profound. An opportunity that, if we get it right, could make a massive contribution to ending poverty, to quickening the delivery of the SDGs, and to strengthening our national security and bringing peace and prosperity. It's an idea. It could be a revolution. It's an opportunity born from recent history, the political and constitutional gymnastics that both of our countries have been going through. And it speaks to the core of who we are and what this institution represents. In recent years, our democracy has been under attack and through some extremely challenging times. We have tested our institutions, our beliefs, our trust in one another to the absolute limit. And there has been disagreement and division in both of our countries. Some might say that that is the hallmark of a weakened nation. I say not. Thinking differently and speaking passionately is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of great strength. In the 2016 EU referendum, we started a process that would spark argument, placards, parliamentary turmoil, court cases, and 2 early general elections. The UK decided that it wished to leave a trading bloc with whom it had been enjoying near frictionless trading goods for 43 years. And 4 years later, after that vote, despite all the difficulties of doing so, we did indeed leave. The political dramas and negotiations were nothing compared to the massive effort needed from our civil servants to reinvent our border, transpose the statute book, and get every business in the land prepared for several eventualities. That's all right, don't worry. I'll just tell you a quick anecdote. I'm a member of Her Majesty's Privy Council, and this is a very, very formal meeting where you have the great and the good of our country standing around, going through this council meeting with Her Majesty. And in one of these proceedings, a minister's phone went off, and Her Majesty said, "Do you want to get that? It might be someone important." Don't worry.
It was a call from Boris Johnson.
Right, he's making sure I'm on message. But my question is, what sort of country goes through all of that? What sort of country does that? Why upset the status quo? Why risk upsetting friends and neighbours? What sort of country strikes out on its own, putting its faith in its own destiny and resourcefulness? What sort of country risks everything to go it alone to make its vision a reality? What sort of people believe so much in the individual and the democratic system that they risk everything, even at some moments in history, to die for it. What sort of country declares its independence and puts its faith in democracy and capitalism? I see some of you are smiling. What sort of country defends those systems and the values that underpin them against the naysayers and pessimists? What sort of country values freedom above all else? We do. Britain and America. There's a reason the Magna Carta and the Declaration of Independence sit side by side in Washington. It shows that first America followed Britain in reinventing its human rights, and years later, Britain has returned the compliment. We've left a trading group whose regulations interoperate with others based on harmonization. And we have chosen a different framework, one favored by the WTO, the CPTPP, and the United States. We want the way our regulatory systems interoperate with others to be based on adequacy and equivalence. That is a seismic shift, and it requires a paradigm shift in the American response in order to maximize the opportunity for all of us. It's not every day that a G7 country does that, leaves the orbit of the EU to enable it to be closer to others, closer to you. This is a major geopolitical event, and it calls for a US response that recognizes this moment and the opportunity that comes from it. The UK's made its choice to leave a trading bloc that is pushing a regulatory system on the rest of the world. And we've got on the side of the table with those who believe in outcomes-based regulation consistent with our common law. We've decided to take back our seats in international fora, to shape the reform agenda, to work to rebuild our capacity to do so, and to plug ourselves back into the global economy. That is our choice, and now America has a choice to make. How will she respond? Brexit is not an event to be mourned by the international community, or an act of self-harm, or one that requires us to be punished. It is a massive opportunity to anyone who believes in democracy and the power of trade as a force for good in the world. There is a global battle between two competing versions of capitalism, one which is checked by democracy and organized by competition, wide-eyed to the limits of the state, and has the progress of all humanity as its Polaris. And the other is a state-led version, where government distortion to seek specific ends is the chosen course. The UK is firmly on the side of the former, competition-based capitalism, in case you were in any doubt. And we would argue that trading superpowers have a special responsibility to practice free and fair trade, to support the multilateral trading system. Because peace and prosperity don't happen by accident. They take work. We want our economies to grow. We want to lift all boats. And it's critical that we do so as the spectre of inflation once again threatens to destroy our hard-earned gains. And when we view the challenges facing us all, whether that be from debt, a backlog in demand on public services, massively disrupted global supply chains, and more, in the UK, we are building a new trade policy that recognizes this. Our leaving the EU should be viewed by any nation who shares those views as reinforcements arriving over the hill. As set out in the UK government's integrated review of security, defence and development and foreign policy, we believe our vision for free and fair trade is the best for humanity. And we will work to tackle the systematic use of market-distorting practices, such as harmful state subsidies and more pernicious government interventions which damage competition. We will ensure that our domestic policy supports UK businesses to compete fairly and on merit. Here, divergence is a national necessity
to quote the UK's chief negotiator with the EU, Lord Frost. But this is not divergence for the sake of it or because we can. It is because we want to leave behind the anti-competitive and protectionist regulation of the EU and cooperate with our trading partners on the basis that it is not for us to dictate how others regulate as long as our overall goals are the same. This regulatory competition is vital to create wealth and growth. In the UK, we are liberalising the growth areas of the future to open them up to greater innovation. Data reform, gene editing, transport, medicine, AI, and more. We're reducing bureaucracy from state aid to procurement and conducting a systematic review of retained EU law. And we're reviewing our domestic agriculture regime and our immigration system and devising the best border in the world by 2025 with a chain of free ports around the UK. We will continue to push for reform and modernisation at the WTO, and we will stand with our allies to tackle unfair trade practices that threaten the livelihoods of our citizens, harm businesses, and erode trust in the functioning of the global trading system. The UK is also one of the few countries that it is negotiating simultaneously with all key players, and it has therefore made itself a player on the global chessboard. And the US needs to understand and recognise the UK's new position. This is far more significant than just the size of its market. When America set itself free, it was a small economy. It's my hope that our move will act as a catalyst to greater trade liberalisation around the world, driven by democracy and freedom, with fairness, free markets and competition underpinning everything that we do. In these efforts, we have many partners and allies. We are deepening those partnerships with trade at the heart of our engagement. But perhaps the most critical partner for us is the US. For the US to wait, to seize those opportunities, would to be to all our detriment, but also to its own. It is in our own interest to step up our trade policy discussions and negotiations. It is vital to every agenda, domestic and foreign, that the US holds dear. You want to level up and regenerate communities? You need to increase opportunities for business and attract investment. You want the prospect of a best-in-class deal on agriculture? Think you will get that from the EU? You want higher paid jobs? Then you need to let competition and innovation thrive. You want to strengthen your national security? You need to protect, then, the vital infrastructure and access to materials and products. You want a balance to China? Then you need to increase growth, your role in creating prosperity and your relevance in the Indo-Pacific. You want to defend against authoritarianism, fight corruption, and promote respect for human rights. Then place trade at the centre of everything you do. You want to protect the environment and give your population access to the latest science and medicine? Then you need to enable smart people to collaborate and what they've invented to be taken up fast. You want to secure supply chains and cyberspace, then focus on modernising trade. You want to make poverty history. No other activity has done more to achieve that in the history of mankind than trade. And if you want democracy and capitalism to thrive for your young people, and that they continue to believe in those systems, then you need to ensure that they work for them. As our Prime Minister said at the Summit for Democracies last week, alongside security, trade, and economic partnerships, they're central to strengthening democracy and standing up for our values. Trade must be at the heart of our domestic, economic, and international security policy. A focus on trade cannot wait until you have done the other stuff. Imagine what an invigorated shared vision for trade, building on the Atlantic Charter and on AUKUS and our shared beliefs in the Indo-Pacific could do. How powerful that would be. Imagine if we had developed that vision enough by 2023, by the time Japan has the presidency of the G7, India the G20, and while there is an Australian Secretary-General of the OECD. What an opportunity that would be. We don't need a new gadget in our diplomatic tool bag. We need to dust off an old one. The UK will work hard on this agenda, and we will bring to life the words in the Atlantic Charter and maximise the potential of AUKUS. That's why I'm here for such an extended period of time, travelling state by state, speaking not just to senators, congressmen, governors, agriculture commissioners and trade secretaries, but to mayors, councilmen, businesses, social enterprise, philanthropists and trade bodies. We want to understand how we can get a real step change in trade relations and to increase trade between the UK and every corner of the US. And we're seeking ways to unlock barriers for businesses at state level too, finding new areas of cooperation and swiftly delivering new partnerships. Our newfound freedom means that we can now build formal links with states through memoranda of understanding to create a shift in trade relationships, and we're exploring these wherever we go. And we now have several discussions underway about liberalising regulations and increasing partnership in key growth areas, cutting bureaucracy and increasing flexibility in the core areas of economic trade between our countries. We can make progress on regulator-to-regulator discussions, removing more barriers, and where it helps, create mutual recognition of qualifications. Professional business services make up one of the largest sectors for both our countries' economies. Existing regulations make it incredibly difficult and expensive to switch between countries or even states. That's why the UK is exploring where we can reduce time and costs in delivering these services. Now, this is not a replacement of an ambitious, future-facing trade deal between the UK and the US, but a complementary and helpful step to make sure that we can take full advantage of existing and future opportunities. And on our travels, we've had a great reception. Politicians might not like change, but entrepreneurs love it. And the questions they have asked us have been much about the global good, as how the global goods can be derived, as about their own firms and community. Already responsive to the social, environmental and ethical concerns of their customers, investors and employees, businesses are taking seriously their responsibilities to tackle harms and address poverty. They are the greatest agents of change we have in the world, more capable and responsive than any government. By unlocking markets for good businesses, we can lessen the likelihood of failed states, for hotbeds for dangerous ideologies, or sources of illegal immigration and cross-border crime. The expertise in our service sector in banking, law, fintech and IP and more can assist developing nations to improve the ease of doing business and security for prospective investors and entrepreneurs in emerging markets, in turn creating jobs and tax revenue to fund health and education. And science, construction and advanced manufacturing sectors can help tackle some of the environmental challenges our planet faces to deliver on the world's ambitions started and set out at COP26. And the people I've been speaking to on my tour understand that trade policy is not just about FTAs, but also about a shared mission to deliver liberalisation, competition, and property rights protection to the greatest number of people on Earth. Everyone we speak to, in the north, south, east or west, Democrat or Republican, producer or consumer, local or federal, private, public or philanthropist, feels that mission deeply. It's who you are, America. It's who we are too. I believe passionately that the world is a safer, better place when Britain and America work together for common goals around the world. We've a shared cultural DNA, wealth creation, open trading systems, competition on merit, protection of property rights, delivered in the framework of a common law tradition we share. Our partnership has already delivered so much to people on both sides of the Atlantic and across the globe. Our security partnership has kept the world safe for over 100 years. But with an unshackled UK, we can take more ambitious steps, putting trade at the heart of our relationship and shared global challenges. As President Biden said, in the competition against China and other nations in the 21st century, let's show American democracy and the American people can truly outcompete anyone. I'm just at the start of my tour around the US, but I know this much. The President is right. And what he says applies to us Brits too. We have the most entrepreneurial, freedom-loving people. We can do anything, and much depends upon us having the chance to. We've made our move. We've made ourselves a player on the global chessboard and presented you with an unprecedented opportunity. Let future generations of Americans not say, in this moment of choosing, you failed to grasp that opportunity. Too many people in the world, many of whom are voiceless, are relying on us both to make the right choice. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So now I'm going to ask you a few questions while you and the audience are thinking of questions. So I get to go first, though.
Marvelous.
That's my advantage. I'm going to ask you, be specific. You want the United States to grasp the opportunity. What specifically would you like the United States to do?
Get a move on. So I think there's several things that we can do. I mean, actually, I spoke a little about what we can get done at state level just to help our businesses and build some of those connections. And we've been pushing it an open door as we've been going around, talking to governors, talking to people interested in commerce and development, but also agriculture commissioners, many, many people. And there are lots of ideas about how we can not just remove those costs for our businesses, but also create some really strong partnerships in particular sectors. And for us, it's incredibly important to Andrew and the whole team here that we really understand what the ambition and the desire is, because when you bring smart people together to work on the same problem, everyone's a winner. That has been going very well, and I hope we'll be able to do more of that. But at a federal level, we want to pick up the pace on this super FTA. There's a process in train at the moment, and we are working in partnership with our opposite numbers. But we need people to really be a bit of a cheerleading squad if you want good things to happen in that deal. So that's what I think needs to happen.
As it's progressing now, what's the timeline for those negotiations?
Well, we would say we want them to be slightly more quicker than they currently are, and we obviously have some immediate things to try and resolve outside of those negotiations. 232, for example, we want to be removing barriers to trade, not adding to them, and I think that certainly everyone we've spoken to would want that too. So we hope that there'll be more clarity going into the new year about a timetable on both those issues. But if it's going to work really well, we need people to keep forwarding their ideas, keep talking about this. The people that are going to FTAs are great, they're very interesting, lots of journalists concentrate on them, but what we're really interested in is what they yield, what comes out of them and the opportunities that they open up.
That's great. I want to make sure everybody understands that when the UK left the EU, you had no trade agreements.
We did have trade agreements. We had different types of trade agreements with lots of different parts of the world, but obviously a lot of our trading arrangements were through the prism of the EU. So we had to roll over a lot of those agreements. So as we left the EU, they were still in place and valid, which sounds an easy thing to do, but actually isn't.
It's
not. Thank you for saying that. It's quite a lengthy process to do that. So that was our kind of first round of extracting ourselves from that trading bloc. But now we have an enormous number of discussions going on. So all the live FTAs plus a pipeline of FTAs. But in between that, we have all kinds of sector agreements. We've just signed a digital agreement, for example, with Singapore. We're doing these sorts of things continually, and not a week goes by before we're announcing something new. So
and they're very labor intensive to get them done.
They are. I mean, and we have rebuilt our capacity to do this. I mean, if you can imagine when you're relying on the EU to do all this for you, you don't have necessarily this in your civil service. So a huge amount of effort has been put in to literally rebuild the department that I'm now part of. And we're building that capacity all the time, not just in terms of our negotiations, but also our support for business as well. So new trader support services, new export support services. So we're motoring now.
The UK has said it wants to join the CPTPP, which I have to write this down because it's the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, which the United States helped negotiate and then pulled out of 4 years ago. Now the UK wants to join, as I understand. Are there active negotiations going on?
Absolutely. So there's an accession process to be part of that. We're going through that at the moment, and there were really important staging posts in that. So we've recently had an in-principle agreement with both Australia and New Zealand. Again, new deals, removing barriers to trade, removing tariffs, and also talking about the things that are really important to us both. So they're very helpful in terms of that process.
So if the United States were to join CPTPP, that's a mouthful, does that somehow obviate the need for a US-UK agreement?
No, it doesn't. And obviously we have trade agreements, free trade agreements with countries that are part of that trading bloc. But it is another tool to be able to shape the global trading network that we care about. And I think that actually we ought to be thinking outside of even those agreements as well through our work at the WTO to push and be quite aggressive about the agenda that I've just set out. Because if we really are going to maximize the benefits and the power of trade, particularly for developing nations, we need to be really going after those distortions and ensuring that we have competition and merit driving everything.
You talked about competitive capitalism, and in my experience, every business is in favor of competitive capitalism until it doesn't work for them, and then they want tariffs and all kinds of protection. The idea is that innovative new businesses are going to create jobs and better paying jobs, but they're the losers who don't do well, who don't innovate their businesses, and the workers suffer because they're no longer competitive. How do we create new jobs fast enough and retrain our workforce quickly enough so that our citizens, our voters in the end, in Portsmouth North and in the 5th District of Georgia, understand how this works for them, that it is working, that it is lifting all boats?
Absolutely. So I think that part of the battle I have, and why I've just put you through a speech, is because we have to make the case for the power of trade to be a force for good in the world. I mean, sometimes when we talk about trade agreements, they're seen as a bad thing, and we've got to shove more environmental stuff in, and we've got to have a chapter on this. And indeed, our trade agreements do that. But actually, bringing people together, removing barriers, enabling people who have problems and people who have solutions to come together and fix things is incredibly important. And there's so much evidence as to why when you have a model that really encourages and enables people to trade together and doesn't make people choose between which markets it's really going to go after, that's when you alleviate poverty.
Well-
and you present people with more opportunities.
And it's lifted 1 billion people out of poverty over the past 20 years. I mean, that's the extraordinary thing.
Absolutely. And I think that you have to also do other things, clearly, to enable businesses to take the maximum opportunity that's there. I'm very focused on trade as a force for good, and in particular, developing parts of the world, really understanding, by talking to entrepreneurs who've been very successful there and have just a great social philosophy as well, to really understand what are the conditions that make that successful. And it's things like access to banking. It's all the things that our service sectors can really help with and provide the innovation to enable that to happen. And that won't happen unless, I think, we stop taking some of our relationships for granted. We always talk about the special relationship, but it's very unusual for a British minister to tour state by state, and that's wrong. We should be here, much more frequently, and working hard at building those opportunities and connections.
I'm going to ask one more question while all you are ready to raise your hands. But so tell me about that strategy, going state by state. I mean, you're not going to Washington on this visit,
No.
as I understand it, which I think is terrific. But explain that. I mean, what is it you hope to achieve in Tennessee and South Carolina and Georgia and California, rather than by meeting with the federal government?
So, I mean, don't get me wrong, there are ministers who we're still talking to each other. That happens a lot and will continue to happen. But I think we have so many more opportunities now to enable people and businesses to have a really profound impact on the world. So much, when I came out here, I spoke to all of our metro mayors across the UK. Really different places, really different people, lots of different interests and centres of excellence, and I was asking them about their ambitions. And they weren't really talking about a deal between them or more partnerships between them and the US. They were talking about specific places in the United States where they had a real connection where there was a real sense of place, that they understood each other, and that they had shared common interests. And that, I think, is incredibly powerful. Some of the most wonderful things, I have a background in life sciences, and some of the most fantastic inventions that have come have been through changing how we work together in that sector on intellectual property. Because we haven't just brought more smart people together working on the same therapy area. We've brought people from very different disciplines together, like material science with heart health, for example, and had just breakthrough in medicine. So the more we can do that, the more that we are creating those opportunities and we're improving our situational awareness about those opportunities, the better.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, one of the things we all need to remember is that trade is not between countries, it's between businesses.
Yeah.
It's, businesses doing business with businesses, and that allow that to happen is what really is the dynamic force.
Absolutely.
That brings wealth to both businesses in both countries, right?
Absolutely.
Questions, please. Oh, come on.
Where are your students?
Yeah, call on. Oh, we got it. Is that Joe? Is that you with your hand up? Joe's a professor at Georgia Tech, among other things.
And part of the challenges are the speed at which things can be done at the top level, the federal level. I very much like your approach. The question goes back to Charles. What are the specific things that in the locality in which we operate, what is now the Atlanta Regional Trading Area, really the ARC, that can be done? We have huge international components. It started really as a distribution center, and give us a shopping list. What would be your wishes for this area?
Yeah. So two things. I mean, first of all, a few years ago, as a politician, if someone said to me, we just need government to move these things out the way. We need you to do this. We need you to do this in order that we can get from A to B. I would have, listened and said, yes, we're working on it. Let me write that down. Let me go and report back to my senior ministers. These days, I say, just get on with it. There is so much that we can do by just enabling your ideas and your vision. And business is best place to do this, to say what are the things that need to happen. This is why I'm going around with my ears pinned back. Wherever we've gone, there have been different wish lists from different states, as you'd expect. We've had some very productive conversations here with the business community, and we are going to be taking forward some discussions which will focus on particular sectors, some of which you have mentioned, because I think we want some quick, tangible things that are going to make a difference. So the sorts of things, just to give you, not to blow our early negotiations out the water, but the sorts of things that we've been discussing with other places, our kind of menu as we've been going around, as it were. Mutual recognition of qualifications. So businesses really trying to get the right technical people to come and do things on both sides of the Atlantic, but there being barriers to that. Really focus on regulators to enable us to again remove barriers and costs between people doing particular things, or even people moving between particular states. And then a whole raft of other things around removing particular barriers that might be in particular places. It's been very interesting to me going from state to state, looking at places which are very, very successful and looking at others which have lost out to particular sectors, environmental tech, for example. So we are now here, we are going to be progressing some discussions, but we're focused on particular industries and sectors. And the Innovation Centre here as well, I think, will be at the heart of those discussions. And again, focused on very, very practical things. I'm not planning on producing, masses of reports and all of that. What can we do? Tell us what needs to be done for good stuff to happen. And that's what we'll do.
Way in the back, in the corner. That's you. Yes.
Well, that's a great question, because if you really believe the stuff I just said, that you think that both sides of the equation are equally important, and I do believe that. I think the opportunities will vary from sector to sector, but just to give you one example, AUKUS. AUKUS is...
Explain for just a second what that is, so everybody knows.
So you may have heard about the... it was kind of billed as a submarine deal, but it's slightly more than a submarine deal. So this is a closer partnership between Australia, the UK, and the United States. And at the heart of it, one of the kind of trailblazing announcements was the pivot from Australia buying its submarines from France to working with our two nations on that program. But it is so much more than that. And when we look at I actually started my visit over in California at an event hosted by the Hoover Institute, and it was the Indo-Pacific Security Dialogue with the Quad, and the UK was invited as well. And if we want to strengthen our defence and security partnerships in that part of the world and elsewhere, the Five Eyes partners and the kit we use and the supply chains that support it and where we have our basing and what facilities we have at our basing and all of those things are really, really critical. We already coordinate very well in so many aspects of our defence and security, and we should be doing exactly the same in terms of the supply chains that support it. So it's absolutely in our interest that if there's a bit of kit that is being provided or a service that's being provided and it's interoperable, that we're aware of those things. And we know from the pandemic, I mean, if there's one lesson that we've learned is that sovereign capabilities are important, but if you want true resilience, you have to have some sovereign capabilities, but you need to have a supply chain that can cope with all these events. So, you know, this is a wake-up call for us, really, and it's only through these kind of partnerships and also creating hubs and opportunities for our small and medium-sized enterprises as well that we will get that resilience. And it's only through sitting down in a room with people at a local level that we will get those opportunities and find those incredibly innovative companies that are going to mean the margin of victory for us.
That's great. There was another question. Yes, sir.
This is a trade policy question. Now, you've spoken about Britain having greater flexibility since it's left the EU to set trade policy. To what extent has its trade policy towards China changed, or is it likely to change? And is the UK and the US on the same page?
So I think that it has changed quite a bit. Not really, though, driven by leaving the EU in that respect. I mean, I sometimes refer to China in the type of model that it uses, that harmonization model. But that's not really the reason our stance has changed. We have just, I think, become more aware and better at understanding what we want from our supply chains, particularly for critical national infrastructure, security, and defense. Now that we are on the same page as the US. So we're very keen that we don't have particular products and particular suppliers in some of our critical national services and in our defense products. We want a trading relationship with China. They're important in that respect. But in recent years, there have clearly been some challenges and some things that we do not wish to ignore about that relationship. And we will continue to work through those. I think there is a huge amount of consensus with the US on many of those things. Sometimes it's helpful to us both to have a slightly different position and approach in how we do that. But I also think that in that critical region, as I said in my speech, if our narrative is just about aircraft carriers and where they've been sailing recently, and don't get me wrong, look at my Twitter profile, I love aircraft carriers, but that really isn't particularly inspiring. What we need to be talking about is the prosperity that the rules-based order that we support can deliver and the opportunities to nations in that region. And that, I think, we're absolutely on the same page on.
That's great. Yes, Ramesh.
Hi.
My question is more about your book, The Greater Britain After the Storm. And I know you started, from what I understand, is you started with your co-authors, probably in a different position on the Brexit decision. As you wrote the book and as you've gone through the country now, do you feel that the Brexiters and the Remainers are still far apart, or do you feel like there's a common understanding of the new Britain going forward?
Yeah, so thank you. And so for those who don't know, my co-author on my book voted Remain. I voted Brexit, but we actually wanted to write the book together because we wanted to set out a vision for Britain and what should happen next. I've always said that the heroes of Brexit were not people like me that voted to leave the EU. There were people that voted Remain and accepted the democratic result. I mean, that is unshakable faith in democracy. And most people in Britain had that attitude. I used to go into the House of Commons every day. I would pass placards of every possible position on Brexit. There were fish-based sandwiches and thermos, people in cagoules shouting at Parliament. And that's great. That's strong debate. That's people expressing their opinions. But after the vote, most people said, right, this is what we're going to do. And let's make a success of it. And I do think that that is worth stating, because there is a lot of criticism about democracy and is it delivering for people, and part of the book is a defense of that. So I think people are coming together. The challenge that we all have is that the world is moving at such a fast pace that unless we are modernizing how our democracy works, how our civil service works, how markets work, and making them become more efficient, people will start to lose faith in those systems. That's why we've got to work hard at this, why these things don't happen by accident. There's a quote in the book from, I don't know whether any of you've seen a 1947 movie called This Happy Breed, which is basically all about the Brits. And there's a central character in there that says, you know, we've got our own way of doing things in Britain. It may be a bit slow, it may be a bit fuddy-duddy, but it suits us all right, and it always will. That no longer applies to the modern world. So, and why we need partners like America to come with us and defend these things.
Okay, you get the last question, right? Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. We work here in a big law firm, cross-border team, and we've seen, especially in the last 20 years, there's a lot of investments from other European countries, from Germany, especially France, and because of the Southeast, there's great incentives for good infrastructure and so on and so forth. We sometimes deal with clients and they ask, does the UK have a similar approach? Are there incentives for industries? Are you interested in which kind of industries they move distributions but also production centres to the UK? Because in the last 30 years there was, at least from our point of view, that's where decline of great services, of course, but in traditional industries, but also in modern industries such as medical industries, we deal a lot with medical tech industries in the national area. Mm-hmm. And they're interested in both an inbound and an outbound business. And I just wanted to ask whether certain areas in the UK have such incentives and are interesting. So,
yes. So we have support. I think our approach is about enabling good things to happen. And that's both about businesses and opportunities back in the UK, right down to a very local level. I always tell the story in my own patch where we wanted the America's Cup team to come to Portsmouth, and the time frame that it took, this opportunity came up in September. By March, we had got them in, got enabling funding from 4 government departments, appointed a minister for the city to make sure it ran on rails, designed the building, got planning permission, built the building, designed the boat, built the boat, got the team together, and the first boat was sailing out by the end of March. We move really quickly because we're very nimble, and our structures at a national and local level enable us to do that really well. I mean, I'm a prime example of that. I'm a government minister. I'm a local representative that talks to my local enterprise partnership, my constituents every day of the week. So we can move really quickly, but also with things that we want to enable overseas, because I think one of the big selling points about the UK and people locating in the UK is that we are a gateway to so many other parts of the world. And just with my development hat on, we've never gone in for things like tide aid, because it doesn't work, it doesn't support competition. But what we will do is enable the playing field to be leveled. So if that country or organization chooses a British product, because it's the best product, we will ensure that it can compete on cost. And what that ensures is that other nations who are subsidizing not the best product don't get the contract, and it's quality control. But we're against things like Tide Aid, and everything that we do is about enabling great organizations to compete fairly. That's what we're about.
Minister Penny Mordaunt, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This has been
so
so
much.
good, and I could not agree more with your approach. In the U.S., state and local governments are so much more nimble and able to make decisions than the federal government is, because it's so big. And by doing this, I think that is exactly the right approach, and we need your help to grab that opportunity, because we've got large portions of both of our parties who are opposed to trade agreements. And so what you're doing is terrific, and I want to thank you so much. Thank you for coming to Atlanta, and I wish you well. And I see your staff is ready to grab you and take you out of here.
Thank you so much. Great to
Thank
meet
you. This is great.
Thank you all.
Wait, come take I need a photo with you before you go, or nobody will believe that we were here. Oh, here we are. Okay, good.